usurped the royal authority at Taza. But the rebellion was soon suppressed through the loyalty and devotion of the students. To effect their purpose they resorted to an ingenious stratagem. 40 of them caused themselves to be packed in chests, which were sent as a present to the usurper. In the dead of night, while the unsuspecting Jew was slumbering peacefully among the packing cases, the lids were stealthily raised, the brave 40 crept forth, slew the usurper, and took possession of the city in the name of the real sultan, who, to mark his gratitude for the help thus rendered him in time of need, conferred on the students the right of annually appointing a sultan of their own. The narrative has all the air of a fiction devised to explain an old custom, of which the real meaning and origin had been forgotten. A custom of annually appointing a mock king for a single day was observed at Xxvii in Cornwall down to the 16th century. On Little Easter Sunday the freeholders of the town and manor assembled together, either in person or by their deputies, and one among them, as it fell to his lot by turn, gaily attired and gallantly mounted, with a crown on his head, a sceptre in his hand, and a sword borne before him, rode through the principal street to the church, dutifully attended by all the rest on horseback. The clergyman, in his best robes, received him at the churchyard stile and conducted him to hear divine service. On leaving the church he repaired with the same pomp to a house provided for his reception. Here a feast awaited him and his suite, and being set at the head of the table he was served on bended knees, with all the rites due to the estates of a prince. The ceremony ended with a dinner, and every man returned home. Sometimes the temporary king occupies the throne, not annually, but once for all at the beginning of each reign. Thus in the kingdom of Jambi in Sumatra it is the custom that at the beginning of a new reign a man of the people should occupy the throne and exercise the royal prerogatives for a single day. The origin of the custom is explained by a tradition that there were once 5 royal brothers, the 4 elder of whom all declined the throne on the ground of various bodily defects, leaving it to their youngest brother. But the eldest occupied the throne for one day, and reserved for his descendants a similar privilege at the beginning of every reign. Thus the office of temporary king is hereditary in a family akin to the royal house. In Bilaspur it seems to be the custom, after the death of a Rajah, for a Brahmin to eat rice out of the dead Rajah's hand, and then to occupy the throne for a year. At the end of the year the Brahmin receives presents and is dismissed from the territory, being forbidden apparently to return. Quote, "The idea seems to be that the spirit of the Rajah enters into the Brahmin who eats the kheer (rice and milk) out of his hand when he is dead, as the Brahmin is apparently carefully watched during the whole year and not allowed to go away." End quote. The same or a similar custom is believed to obtain among the hill states of Kangra. The custom of banishing the Brahmin who represents the king may be a substitute for putting him to death. At the installation of a prince of Carinthia, a peasant, in whose family the office was hereditary, ascended a marble stone which stood surrounded by meadows in a spacious valley. On his right stood a black mother cow, on his left a lean, ugly mare. A rustic crowd gathered about him. Then the future prince, dressed as a peasant and carrying a shepherd's staff, drew near, attended by courtiers and magistrates. On perceiving him the peasant called out, "Who is this whom I see coming so proudly along?" The people answered, "The prince of the land." The peasant was then prevailed on to surrender the marble seat to the prince on condition of receiving 60 pence, the cow and mare, and exemption from taxes. But before yielding his place he gave the prince a light blow on the cheek. Some points about these temporary kings deserve to be specially noticed before we pass to the next branch of the evidence. In the first place, the Cambodian and Siamese examples show clearly that it is especially the divine or magical functions of the king which are transferred to his temporary substitute. This appears from the belief that by keeping up his foot the temporary king of Siam gained a victory over the evil spirits, whereas by letting it down he imperiled the existence of the state. Again, the Cambodian ceremony of trampling down the mountain of rice, and the Siamese ceremony of opening the ploughing and sowing, are charms to produce a plentiful harvest, as appears from the belief that those who carry home some of the trampled rice, or of the seed sown, will thereby secure a good crop. Moreover, when the Siamese representative of the king is guiding the plough, the people watch him anxiously, not to see whether he drives a straight furrow, but to mark the exact point on his leg to which the skirt of his silken robe reaches, for on that is supposed to hang the state of the weather and the crops during the ensuing season. If the Lord of the heavenly hosts hitches up his garment above his knee, the weather will be wet and heavy rains will spoil the harvest. If he lets it trail to his ankle, a drought will be the consequence. But fine weather and heavy crops will follow if the hem of his robe hangs exactly halfway down the calf of his leg. So closely is the course of nature, and with it the weal or woe of the people, dependent on the minutest act or gesture of the king's representative. But the task of making the crops grow, thus deputed to the temporary kings, is one of the magical functions regularly supposed to be discharged by kings in primitive society. The rule that the mock king must stand on one foot upon a raised seat in the rice field was perhaps originally meant as a charm to make the crop grow high. At least this was the object of a similar ceremony observed by the old Prussians. The tallest girl, standing on one foot upon a seat, with her lap full of cakes, a cup of brandy in her right hand, and a piece of elm bark, or linden bark, in her left, prayed to the god Xxvii that the flax might grow as high as she was standing. Then, after draining the cup, she had it refilled, and poured the brandy on the ground as an offering to Xxvii, and threw down the cakes for his attendant sprites. If she remained steady on one foot throughout the ceremony, it was an omen that the flax crop would be good, but if she let her foot down, it was feared that the crop might fail. The same significance perhaps attaches to the swinging of the Brahmins, which the Lord of the heavenly hosts had formerly to witness standing on one foot. On the principles of homeopathic or imitative magic, it might be thought that the higher the priests swing, the higher will grow the rice. For the ceremony is described as a harvest festival, and swinging is practiced by the Letts of Russia with the avowed intention of influencing the growth of the crops. In the spring and early summer, between Easter and St. John's Day, the summer solstice, every Lettish peasant is said to devote his leisure hours to swinging diligently, for the higher he rises in the air, the higher will his flax grow that season. In the foregoing cases, the temporary king is appointed annually in accordance with a regular custom, but in other cases the appointment is made only to meet a special emergency, such as to relieve the real king from some actual or threatened evil by diverting it to a substitute who takes his place on the throne for a short time. The history of Persia furnishes instances of such occasional substitutes for the Shah. Thus Shah Abbas the Great, being warned by his astrologers in the year 1591 that a serious danger impended over him, attempted to avert the omen by abdicating the throne and appointing a certain unbeliever named Xxvii, probably a Christian, to reign in his stead. The substitute was accordingly crowned, and for 3 days, if we may trust the Persian historians, he enjoyed not only the name and the state but the power of the king. At the end of his brief reign he was put to death. The decree of the stars was fulfilled by this sacrifice, and Abbas, who reascended his throne in a most propitious hour, was promised by his astrologers a long and glorious reign. End of chapter 25. The Golden Bough by Sir James Frazer, chapter 26. Sacrifice of the King's Son. A point to notice about the temporary kings described in the foregoing chapter is that in 2 places, Cambodia and Jambi, they come of a stock which is believed to be akin to the royal family. If the view here taken of the origin of these temporary kingships is correct, we can easily understand why the king's substitute should sometimes be of the same race as the king. When the king first succeeded in getting the life of another accepted as a sacrifice instead of his own, he would have to show that the death of that other would serve the purpose quite as well as his own would have done. Now it was as god or demigod that the king had to die. Therefore the substitute who died for him had to be invested, at least for the occasion, with the divine attributes of the king. This, as we have just seen, was certainly the case with the temporary kings of Siam and Cambodia. They were invested with the supernatural functions, which in an earlier stage of society were the special attributes of the king. But no one could so well represent the king in his divine character as his son, who might be supposed to share the divine afflatus of his father. No one, therefore, could so appropriately die for the king, and through him for the whole people, as the king's son. We have seen that according to tradition, Aun, or On, king of Sweden, sacrificed 9 of his sons to Odin at Uppsala, in order that his own life might be spared. After he had sacrificed his second son, he received from the god an answer that he should live so long as he gave him one of his sons every 9th year. When he had sacrificed his 7th son, he still lived, but was so feeble that he could not walk, but had to be carried in a chair. Then he offered up his 8th son, and lived 9 years more, lying in his bed. After that he sacrificed his 9th son, and lived another 9 years, but so that he drank out of a horn like a weaned child. He now wished to sacrifice his only remaining son to Odin, but the Swedes would not allow him, so he died and was buried in a mound at